I sat frozen on the cold, hard chair in the middle of the courtroom, my hands clenched tightly under the glossy oak table. Across from me, Edward leaned back casually, so relaxed I wanted to punch the smug look off his face. 11 years of marriage, 2 children, a home I tried to hold together with everything I had. Now ending in a courtroom where the man who once held my hand at our wedding was glaring at me like I was the enemy. "I want everything I ever bought her back," Edward said, his voice dripping with arrogance, chilling the air in the room. "And the gifts I gave the kids, too. If anything's worth over $60, I want it returned." I felt my heart drop like it had hit the floor. A punch without fists. Just words. I couldn't believe he was actually putting our children's belongings on the table like they were part of a clearance sale for our marriage. My lawyer Courtney leaned in and whispered, "Genesis, don't react, he's trying to provoke you." I nodded, though my throat was dry like sandpaper. Next to Edward sat her, Kelsey. Blonde curls, bright red lipstick, clearly emphasizing her self-appointed role as the victor in my family tragedy. She gave a faint smile when Edward glanced at me, like they were sharing a moment of triumph over my downfall. Right there in front of the law. I glanced left. My kids weren't here today. I didn't want them to see this. Lily was only 7, still sleeping with the stuffed bear Edward got her on a beach trip 3 years ago. Noah was 12, always trying to act tough, but I knew he cried the whole night after Edward left. And now, the father who once hoisted them onto his shoulders was coldly demanding back the telescope he gave Noah for Christmas. The judge banged the gavel. "The court recognizes the divorce. Custody is granted to Mrs. Genesis Carter. Mr. Edward Carter will pay child support as required by law. Asset agreements have been recorded. Regarding gift returns, if no agreement is reached, parties may pursue separate civil action." Edward curled his lip. Not a smile, but contempt. "We'll proceed," he said without hesitation. "I want everything back. She's nothing to me anymore. Those things belong where they came from." Courtney chuckled quietly, disbelief in her voice. "Lord, he sounds like a pawnshop clerk." I couldn't laugh. I only felt pain, the kind that hollows you out. Not because of diamond necklaces or designer bags, but because I once loved this man enough to give up my career, stay home, raise our children so he could shine. And now he stood there, reclaiming everything like I was just a temporary storage unit. I took a deep breath. I wouldn't beg. I wouldn't break. If he wanted all that so badly, fine. But he would never get back the one thing of true value I once gave him. My trust. On the other side, Kelsey leaned over and whispered something into Edward's ear. He nodded. They laughed together. I turned away. I didn't need to witness another second. I'd had enough. But inside me something stirred. Not hatred, but resolve. If they thought I'd fall apart after this blow, they never truly knew who I was. The next morning, I woke to complete silence. The house, once filled with kids' laughter and the smell of cinnamon waffles, now felt hollow. I walked to the kitchen, turned on the faucet, my hands trembling, not from cold, but from the chill inside me, the kind that lingers after your dignity's been stripped in front of strangers. I looked around at our things, each one tied to a memory. The designer wallet Edward gave me for my 30th birthday. The red heels he once said made me look like I stepped out of a fashion magazine. The painting he bought in Savannah during a rare family trip. And now, according to him, all of it was his. Even Noah's telescope and Lily's music box. I'd spent the whole night thinking. Part of me wanted to countersue, drag Edward back into court until he was drained. But then I remembered Lily's eyes when she asked, "Does Dad still love us?" And I realized I needed to protect something more important, my children's peace. So I decided to return it all. Not because Edward deserved it, but because I refused to carry anything from someone who treated betrayal like a privilege. I didn't need those objects to remind me I was once his wife. I had Lily and Noah, living proof of all I gave from the heart. I began packing at noon, each item placed into boxes like part of a ritual. I wrapped the wallet in tissue, boxed the shoes separately, removed every painting from the walls. But I paused at Noah's room. The telescope still sat by the window, where we used to sit for hours stargazing, where he once whispered, "I'll find a planet and name it after you." I touched the metal, cold as stone. It squeezed my heart. Still, I wrapped it up, because if I didn't, Edward would use it as an excuse to come back, to torment me with more demands. No, I wanted a clean break, no strings, no returns. I wrote up a full inventory, item by item, with condition, estimated value, and when it was received. It stretched nearly 3 pages. I signed the bottom like it was a silent contract with myself. This would be the last time I bowed to that man. That evening, after the kids were asleep, I called Edward. He picked up on the second ring, still smug as ever. "I've packed everything. A delivery truck will bring it to your new address tomorrow. The detailed list is in the first box." Silence. Then a laugh. "Thought you'd put up a fight? Finally learned your place, huh?" I took a breath. "No, Edward, I just don't have time to waste on you anymore." I hung up before he could speak again. My heart raced, but not from fear. From relief. Like I'd finally pulled out a splinter that had been buried deep for years. The next morning, the truck arrived. 2 young men helped load the boxes. I stood in silence, watching, feeling both loss and liberation. When the truck drove off, I went back inside, closed the door, and exhaled. Deeply. I thought it was over. But that night, while folding laundry in Noah's room, he walked in, eyes red. "Mom, did you give Dad the telescope?" I clenched the shirt in my hands. "Yes, baby." He didn't speak. Just sat on the bed, staring into space. "Dad said he'd only borrow it for a few days. We were supposed to watch the meteor shower together this summer." I knelt beside him, holding him close. "I'm sorry, Noah. I know you're upset. I am too. But we'll get a new one. A better one. And this summer, you and we'll watch the meteor shower together, just us." Noah nodded, his eyes watery, but his voice steadier. "I believe you, Mom." I looked at him, and in that moment I knew I had made the right choice. I may have lost every item tied to a broken marriage, but I held on to what no one could ever take. My child's love and the dignity no man could strip away. The name Kelsey flashed on my phone screen like a slap. The woman who stormed into my marriage, was now calling, as if we could somehow laugh about it someday. I stared at the screen, unmoving. I didn't pick up, didn't flinch, just let it ring. Until it stopped. 3 minutes later, a text appeared. "Una says, just making sure you packed the right valuables. Edward's really concerned something might have been left out." I let out a dry laugh, not because it was funny, but because few people could be that shameless. I had packed every item like I was writing a legal indictment. Every gift Edward asked for, I didn't just box it. I labeled it, listed its value, the date received, even the occasion he gave it. Every word on those pages cut through the fantasy Edward tried to sell. The pearl necklace. A birthday gift from when I was pregnant with Lily, valued at around $1,500. Now wrapped carefully in a velvet box with a note. "You gave this to me when you said, 'You're the only one who makes me want to grow up.'" The Italian crystal vase, our 10-year anniversary gift, worth about $600, once placed in the center of the dining table where Lily first practiced writing letters. A crocodile leather wallet. A Valentine's Day gift priced at $890. You said, "You're the only woman I want to make smile every day." The list spanned nearly 4 full pages, neatly handwritten. I slipped it into an envelope, placed it on top of the largest box, and added one final line. "This is everything you ever bought. What I built, you'll never get back." The next morning, I called a moving service and scheduled delivery to Edward and Kelsey's new apartment in Nashville, the place they moved into after I signed the divorce papers. I stood on the porch, watching the movers load the boxes onto the truck, gripping the checklist tightly in my hand. As the truck pulled away, I felt like I had just cut the last thread tying me to a past that had suffocated me for too long. I walked back into the house, picked up my phone, and this time, I was the one who texted first. "Kelsey, every item he asked for has been sent, along with memories I'm sure you'll never be able to replace. Best of luck to you both. I won't be needing any of it anymore." No reply. I didn't need one. 3 days later, an unknown number called. I wasn't going to answer, but something told me to pick up. A man's voice, tight with anger. Caption: Genesis, have you lost your mind? What the hell is this gift list with all those sappy comments? You trying to make me look like a joke? I didn't respond right away. I let the silence settle like an invisible slap. Do you think your silence means you're ashamed? I answered calmly. No, Edward. I'm just trying to understand how you could be shameless enough to demand back the ring Lily wore when she danced at her preschool graduation. He exhaled sharply, then let out a dry laugh. This isn't over. I know, I said. But if you keep pushing, I'll print that list, hand it to your friends, your co-workers, and post it on every social media site with photos. Each item, each story, let everyone know who the man who reclaimed his kids' toys really is. 10 seconds of silence. Finally, he growled, "You'll regret this." No, I said, smiling. I regretted marrying you, but not this. I ended the call, and this time, my hands didn't tremble. That night, I opened my laptop and typed one final note at the bottom of the gift list. Total monetary value $24,870. Total emotional value, no longer relevant. Level of pettiness from the claimant, incalculable. I saved the file to a USB drive. Not for revenge, but to remind myself just how far I'd come from the woman who once swallowed her tears, just to hold on to a man who didn't deserve her. When the delivery truck arrived at Edward's new apartment, the Nashville sun was high, casting bright light through the large front window. Kelsey flung the door open, hair in a high ponytail, her short dress just enough to flaunt her flawless legs. She clapped her hands like a child on Christmas morning. "Finally!" she squealed as the boxes were brought in, neatly stacked in the gleaming hardwood living room. Edward stood with his arms crossed, eyes narrowing at the handwritten labels. Jewelry, appraisal enclosed. Requested assets, complete. Gifts from father to child, returned per request. A delivery worker held out a clipboard. "Signature here, sir." Edward scribbled quickly, barely glancing at the paperwork. His attention was locked on the stash of items he had once given freely, now returned, like a debt paid in full. Kelsey couldn't wait. She ripped open the first box and flung the lid back. Inside lay the pearl necklace Genesis wore on their 10-year anniversary, resting in velvet with a small note. "You gave this when you said, 'I want us to grow old together.'" Kelsey snorted. Ugh, so cheesy. She clasped the necklace around her neck, spun once in front of the mirror, then reached for a pair of gemstone earrings. "These look way better on me anyway." Edward opened more boxes, frowning each time. The triumph he expected didn't come. Instead, each item lay neatly arranged, annotated with a memory. Each one like reading a chapter of a journal he'd forgotten he wrote, now rewritten in cold sarcasm. At the fourth box, he stopped. It was the only one without any note of value or occasion. Just a small line. Not on the requested list. But returned because there's no room for these in a life driven by greed. Kelsey peered over. "What is it? Old artwork?" Edward opened the lid and fell silent. Inside weren't handbags or jewelry. They were hundreds of family photos. One of Noah, wide-eyed the day he first swam alone. One of Lily in her princess dress, beaming behind a castle-shaped birthday cake. Then, the handwritten notes. Crayon-scribbled messages from Lily. "Daddy, I love you. After my dance today, watch the video Mommy took, okay? Daddy, I left the telescope by the window. Let's watch the comet tonight." Edward flipped through more. Heart pounding. Drawings of the four of them, laughter under the sun. Edward carrying Lily on his shoulders. Noah adding a big red heart over the parents' heads. Not a single item had resale value, but each one weighed on his chest like stone. He pulled out another note, unmistakably Genesis's handwriting. "You wanted everything back. I returned it. But this part you never asked for, because you never valued it. Maybe now you'll remember you were once a father, once a husband. If not, toss it out the way you tossed us." He said nothing. Just sat on the floor, the drawings slipping from his hands, a family photo spinning slowly across the wood, like the wind was mocking him. "Edward?" Kelsey asked, annoyed. "Don't tell me you're keeping that pile of junk." He didn't answer. He looked up at her, for the first time seeing it clearly, She didn't belong to those memories. Didn't understand the weight behind each stroke, each innocent smile. Kelsey stepped closer to snatch the photo, but Edward gripped it tight. "Don't touch it," he said, voice low and cold. "Are you serious?" she scoffed. "It's just kids' scribbles." He stood, carefully gathering the photos and notes back into the old box. "To you it's trash," he said. "To me, it was a life." For the first time, Kelsey said nothing. She watched Edward turn away, clutching that trash box as if it might vanish, and realized he wasn't looking at her like the winner anymore. Edward sat alone on the living room floor, faint light casting over the Still Go Bomb box behind him. The apartment felt unusually quiet, like the whole world had backed away, leaving him to face what he once discarded. On his lap lay a picture of Lily in a pale pink ballet dress, smiling wide. Beneath it, a small orange slip with her handwriting. "Daddy, I can dance on my tiptoes now, watch me dance." He clutched the note, a sharp ache rising from his chest to his temples. The photos, the letters, the drawings he once ignored now cut through him like silent blades. At the bottom of the box was a sealed cream envelope, labeled "Child expenses from 2020 to 2024, not including shared living costs." Hands trembling, Edward opened it. Inside was a densely printed breakdown. Year by year, category by category. Noah's tuition, Lily's dance classes, uniforms, books, medicine, birthday gifts, summer camps. Even small items like sun hat for Noah's camping trip, 1995. The total at the bottom, over $27,000 in 4 years. Not a fortune for a man of his income, but every dollar had been quietly paid by Genesis. No complaints, no demands. And in each line item there was love, a kind of love he had never bothered to appreciate. He got up in a daze, walked to the liquor cabinet, poured himself a glass of whiskey. But as he brought it to his lips, he stopped. His throat was parched, but the drink tasted like guilt. He set the glass down, untouched. Kelsey stepped out of the bedroom, towel in hand. "You're still sitting there? I thought you were done with all that drama." Edward didn't reply. He looked at her for a long moment, then asked, voice hoarse, "Do you know who helped Noah study every night for a month when he made the map team?" Kelsey shrugged. "How would I know?" "Genesis," Edward said, staring into the distance. "She even made his presentation slides, borrowed a mini projector so he could practice." "So, she's his mom, that's what moms do." "No, Kelsey. Both parents are supposed to do those things," he said, each word heavy with regret. Kelsey scoffed, tossing the towel onto a chair. "Are you trying to make me some kind of full-time stepmom? That wasn't part of the deal." Edward stood, but the usual irritation was gone. "You're not a replacement. You can't be." "What did you just say?" Kelsey snapped, spinning around. "You know, I thought leaving Genesis was the first step toward living my truth. I thought you were the freedom I needed. But now I realize freedom isn't about running from responsibility. It's about holding on to what matters while you still can." Kelsey burst out laughing. "What, you suddenly became a philosopher? Let me guess. Those crayon drawings and old receipts enlightened you? Oh, please, Edward." He didn't respond. No anger, no argument, just quietly gathered the photos and letters, placed them carefully back in the old box, and carried it into his study. He sat down, opened his laptop, typed a few lines, then paused. After a moment, he opened a new email, entered Genesis' address, the one he never thought he'd use again. Subject: "Thank you, and I'm sorry." The message was short. "Lowe's. I received the box, and what you sent wasn't material. It was a mirror, one that showed me the husband and father I failed to be. Thank you for letting me see that before it's too late. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just the chance to start again with Noah and Lily, if you'll let me." Edward hit send, then sat in silence, the glow of the screen the only light in the room. Like a crack in the wall, letting a sliver of redemption through. That evening, as I was wiping down the kitchen counter after dinner, my phone chimed. Just a soft ding. A new email. I wasn't expecting anything, so I planned to leave it until morning. But then I glanced at the sender's name. Edward Carter. I froze. I opened it. The subject line was simple. Thank you. And I'm sorry. I read it slowly, afraid to miss even one detail that might shift how I felt. I received the box, and what you sent wasn't material. It was a mirror, one that showed me the husband and father I failed to be. Thank you for letting me see that before it's too late. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just the chance to start again with Noah and Lily, if you'll let me. I sat down, hollow. It took me a moment to realize my hand was gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles were white. I wasn't surprised he wrote. I was surprised by the sincerity in every line. This wasn't a cheap apology after the damage was done. It was a confession, a real one. An admission that I had been right all along. I walked into the bedroom, quietly opened a drawer and pulled out a brown envelope. It was the letter I had written and nearly placed at the bottom of the box but took out at the last second. Part of me believed he'd never read it. Part of me wanted to keep it for myself. I unfolded the paper. My handwriting was slightly slanted, neatly spaced, but clearly written in a moment of deep emotion. I read it again, every word like a needle through my chest. And Edward? You can take everything, the necklace, the watch, the handbags, even the gifts you once claimed were for the kids. But there are 3 things you can't take because you never gave them in the first place. My care. Time. You never stayed up until 3 a.m. when Noah had a fever. Never comforted Lily when kids teased her at school. Never left work to watch her dance recital or see Noah present his science fair project. I did all of that, not out of obligation but love. Love isn't measured in the price tag of a gift, but in presence. And you were never there. You want it all back? As if that could rewind the years you ignored. But what the kids and I have are memories, and you're not in them. Genesis. I folded the letter and this time, I knew I had to send it. The next morning, while Lily was picking out white socks for school, I stopped by the post office. I placed the letter in a plain envelope, no return address, only one name. Edward Carter. No further words were needed, the letter would speak for itself. Edward's apartment, 1 week later, rain tapped against the windows. He sat alone on the balcony, hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee, eyes drifting now and then toward the small box resting neatly on the table. When the letter arrived, he hadn't opened it right away. He placed it aside as if afraid of what it might say. But that morning something shifted. He picked it up and carefully peeled open each layer. He read it once. Then again, and a third time his vision blurred, not from rain. There wasn't a single harsh word. But each line sliced through him, reminding him of the chances he once had to be a real father, and how he had thrown them away. He stood up, opened a drawer, pulled out the drawings and letters from Lily and Noah. Each crayon stroke, each line of childlike writing sank his shoulders a little lower. He remembered the night Lily slipped in the bathroom. Genesis stayed up all night watching her. He remembered Noah calling 5 times to invite him to the end-of-year ceremony. And he had said he was too busy. For the first time in months, Edward cried. Not for losing Genesis, but for missing the years that could have been the best of his life, and choosing to stay on the sidelines. He wrote a letter to Noah, then a postcard to Lily, not long, not poetic, just a quiet beginning. That day, I was watching Lily tie the ribbons on her ballet shoes when the doorbell rang. I opened it. A delivery man handed me a small envelope. Inside was Lily's drawing, the one I had sent back. On the back, Edward had written in shaky blue ink, "I don't deserve to keep this memory, but I'd like to remember it every day." Edward sank to the floor of his study, back against the bookshelf, my letter slipping from his hand onto the carpet. The room was so quiet he could hear every tick of the wall clock, each second pulling him deeper into a flood of shame and truth. He had thought he'd won. He had thought leaving me and the kids would lead to a life of freedom and fulfillment with Kelsey, but now, surrounded by cold possessions that couldn't fill the hole in his heart, every word in my letter shattered what little illusion he had left. He hadn't just lost a wife. He had lost himself. Kelsey walked in, smoothie in hand, and spotted Edward sitting like a man unraveling. She glanced down, saw the letter, and picked it up. "Another one from her?" she asked. her voice sharp with annoyance and jealousy. Edward said nothing. His eyes were bloodshot, not from anger, but from a sorrow he could no longer hide. "She's right," he finally whispered, voice raw. "I was never there. Not for you, not for Noah, not for Lily. I don't know how they grew up. I don't know what song my daughter hums, or what subject my son loves most." Kelsey scoffed like it was a bad joke. "Edward, you're letting her manipulate your emotions. She just wants to guilt trip you." He looked at her, really looked, for the first time. No makeup, no flirty smile, no soft lighting, just a woman standing in front of him, void of love, understanding, or sacrifice. "Kelsey," he said slowly, "have you ever asked me about Noah? About Lily? Do you know their teachers' names? Do you even remember Noah's birthday?" She was silent, then exhaled sharply, brushing it off. "I'm not their mom. I'm not playing this sweet ex-wife game with her." "No," he shook his head. "You're not their mom. But you were never a partner either. You showed up when things were easy. Genesis showed up when everything was falling apart. And she was the one who built it back." The air thickened, his words breaking out from the cocoon he had locked himself in for too long. "Since moving here, you've spent thousands on clothes and handbags. But have you ever once asked me, how's work? How are the kids? Are you okay?" He stood up and picked the letter off the floor. "You don't have to be a great mom. But at least don't make me feel worse every time I try to talk about my past." Kelsey flicked her hair, eyes narrowing. "So what do you want, Edward? To crawl back to Genesis? You think she'll just open her arms after everything you did?" "No," he said firmly. "I don't expect that. And I don't deserve forgiveness. But at the very least, I can try to be the father Noah and Lily deserve." That ended it. Kelsey moved out shortly after. She packed up, left a note on the counter. "My love isn't a storage unit you come back to whenever you feel empty." Edward didn't argue. Didn't stop her. He simply returned to my box not to reread it but to understand it. Each drawing, every scribbled note, every line from the spending breakdown seeped into him. It was an entire chapter of life he had lived on the sidelines. That night he didn't go to a bar, didn't turn on Netflix, didn't pour a drink. He sat down and handwrote a letter to Noah, then one for Lily. He knew he couldn't rewind time, but he could start making things right, one step at a time. But Kelsey didn't stay gone for long. One sweltering June afternoon while Edward was out picking up Lily for his scheduled visitation, Kelsey showed up at the apartment door, holding a newborn baby and dragging a suitcase behind her. "This is your child," she said, eyes glistening as if she were bestowing him a miracle. Edward stood frozen, his heart tightening. He had no emotions left to show, no anger, no shock, just an emptiness spreading from his chest to the tips of his fingers. "You didn't tell me before?" he asked. Kelsey shrugged and placed the baby on the sofa. "You stopped caring. But I'm tired now. I need you to watch him for a while. I have things to handle in Miami." Before Edward could respond, she was gone. The baby started crying. Not loud, but loud enough to snap Edward out of the fog. He picked the child up clumsily, like a stranger holding something that should have felt familiar. From that moment, Edward's life spiraled into chaos. He lost his job for missing too many unapproved days to care for the baby. The bank threatened to repossess the apartment as his credit card debt climbed into the thousands. Every night he stayed up rocking the baby to sleep, his mind spinning with formulas, diapers, overdue bills, and broken dreams. Then one evening, neighbors called the police after loud shouting came from Unit 6D. They found Edward standing in the middle of the living room, face flushed, yelling at Kelsey, who had returned after a week not to reclaim the baby out of maternal love, but to demand money. "You owe me child support. You think raising a baby is free?" she screamed, snatching at the bag in Edward's hand. "You were gone for a week. I lost my job, my apartment. What else do you want?" he shouted back, voice cracking with desperation. During the struggle, a glass vase fell and shattered. Police arrived within 5 minutes of the noise complaint. They found Edward standing numbly among the shards while Kelsey clutched the baby, sobbing like the only victim in the room. Edward was handcuffed. Not for harming anyone, but for disturbing the peace and creating a hazardous environment for a child. Under the red and blue flashes of the police lights, he felt like a background character in a life that had long since gone off the rails. I heard about the incident 2 days later from an old lawyer acquaintance who worked in the county courthouse. She called me, her voice calm, but clear. "Genesis, I don't know if you plan to intervene, but Edward, he's not the man you once knew. He's falling apart." I looked out the window. Lily was jumping rope with friends in the yard. Inside, Noah was working on a new robot model I'd just bought him, and suddenly I thought, maybe that was why I once loved Edward. Because some small, fragile part of him had truly wanted to be a good father. I sighed. I didn't love Edward anymore, but I didn't hate him either. And I couldn't turn away when my children could be the ones affected. That night, I picked up my phone and typed a message. Short, emotionless. I heard what happened. If you're truly ready to change for Noah and Lily, I'll listen. If not, please don't reach out again. I set the phone down just as Lily ran in, beaming, saying she'd counted to 100. And for the first time in a long while, I felt completely at peace. Because I knew I had done everything right for my children, for myself, and for a past that now only lived as a lesson. I don't remember exactly when I started slipping. Maybe it was after that last call with the lawyer, when I learned Edward had been arrested and Kelsey had vanished, leaving the baby with the police and a mountain of responsibility no one wanted. Or maybe it was that night when Noah came into my room near midnight and whispered, "Mom, if Dad isn't a good person anymore, am I still supposed to love him?" I couldn't answer right away. His question wasn't a knife to the heart. It twisted somewhere deeper, where I had hidden all the cracks. I began waking up later. Meals became cold toast and stale coffee. Lily kept dancing, Noah kept excelling, but I felt like I was walking through thick smoke, knowing I needed to move forward but unable to find the way. One late afternoon, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror for a long time. My cheeks had hollowed, the shadows under my eyes so dark I didn't need makeup to see them. That wasn't me. That wasn't the woman who had held our family together through every storm. I called Dr. Eleanor, the therapist who helped me through the divorce. She didn't ask many questions. She just said one sentence that broke me. "Genesis, you've been strong for too long, but you don't have to be strong alone." I agreed to check into inpatient treatment for 10 days. It was the hardest stretch I'd ever endured. Not because I missed my kids, but because for the first time, I faced myself with no mask, no defenses. I wrote in a journal every day, scribbled messy sketches on paper, sometimes just circles and gray shapes, sometimes Lily's hands mid-dance, or Noah's tilted face as he read. On the last day, the doctor walked me into the garden and said, "You have the energy of a creator, Genesis. Don't let it die in grief. Let it save you." I went home with a pad of drawing paper and an old box of watercolor paints. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, once covered in divorce paperwork, once echoing with Kelsey's screaming voice, and I began to paint. Not for an exhibition, not for validation, just because I needed to. I needed to feel color on my fingertips again. Noah was the first to notice. He peeked into my sketchbook and whispered, "Mom, it's the one you drew of me in the kitchen. It's really good." I smiled. "Thank you." That was the first light I'd seen in a long time. A month later, I joined a free Saturday painting class at the community center. I brought real paintings, painted with pain and healing. Soon after, a local gallery curator named Monica Richards approached me. She simply said, "You don't need to be famous, you just need to be real, and your work is..." I was invited to join a group exhibition titled Resilience, a theme that felt written just for me. Opening night, I wore an olive green dress Lily picked out, hair tied back neatly. Monica stood beside me, glowing. "Genesis," she said, "there's a patron from Chicago who wants to talk. They're scouting for this year's personal development grant." I couldn't believe it. I had once been the woman asked to return her daughter's music box in a courtroom. Now, I stood in a gallery with my painting Between Storms hanging center wall, painted on my third sleepless night in the hospital. 3 weeks later, I received the letter. A $10,000 fall artist grant and a solo show at the local art institute. I cried reading it. Not for the money, Not for the recognition, but because for the first time in years I was being seen for me. Not as someone's wife, not as someone's mother, just as Genesis. A woman who had fallen, but never stayed down. And when Lily hugged me from behind and whispered, "Mom, you're the bravest person in the world," I knew I was back. Not as a shadow in someone else's story, but as my own vivid, whole self. One autumn morning, golden light streamed through the studio window as I finished the last painting for my solo show. My phone rang. The name on the screen stopped my heart for a moment. Edward Carter. I stared at it, hesitated for a few seconds, then declined the call. A minute later, a message arrived. "I know I have no right to bother you. I just want to talk. Not to ask for anything, just to say thank you. If you don't want to, I'll never contact you again, I promise." I sat down, wiped the dried paint from my fingers, and typed a brief reply. "Thank you for keeping your word. But I've turned the page, and in this chapter, you're no longer a main character." I hit send. No trembling, no regret. My life, at long last, was mine. No more judgmental stares, no more sacrificing dreams to hold together a marriage that had rotted at its roots. Now, I woke up not from duty, but from passion. I still drove Noah to robotics every Tuesday, still sat front row as Lily practiced for the winter ballet. But instead of rushing home to prepare dinner for a man who always came late, I drove straight to my art studio, a space in the local artist co-op I now paid for with the earnings from my paintings. Called it my freedom corner. There I wasn't Edward's ex-wife. I was Genesis Carter, the woman who rose from ashes, one stroke at a time. My collection, Resurgence, was chosen as the headliner for the winter exhibition at the city's Museum of Modern Art. Every painting marked a chapter of my journey, from shattered to still, from darkest night to among light. And hanging on the largest center wall was No Turning Back, an abstract image of a woman stepping through a burning doorway, holding only a paintbrush. The opening night was packed. I wore a simple black dress, hair in a sleek bun, lips painted with soft red, understated but confident. People who once brushed past me at Edward's events now stopped to shake my hand, ask about inspiration, request autographs. A collector from Seattle offered to buy the entire series for a price I'd never even imagined. As I was speaking to an art magazine reporter, Monica returned a whispered, "Genesis, there's a man in the hallway. He's been standing in front of No Turning Back for a while. I think you should know." I stepped out. Edward stood there, thinner, hair streaked with gray, wearing a white shirt and gray slacks, simple and out of place in a world filled with color. He held nothing but a quiet gaze and two empty hands. "You really stepped out of the fire," he said, voice low, the voice of someone who had learned to whisper after too much screaming. I nodded. "And I didn't get burned. I just wanted to see you," he said awkwardly. "To know if you were okay." "I am," I replied, looking him straight in the eyes. "And the best part is, I didn't need you to get here." He gave a faint, sad smile. "I understand." I turned to leave but paused. "Edward," he looked up. "The only thing I ask is that you do right by Noah and Lily from now on. Not for me. For you." He nodded, said nothing else. I walked back into the gallery, my heels tapping steady on the floor. Monica met me halfway. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. I smiled. Never better. That night when I got home, Noah was reading and Lily lay stretched on the sofa under her favorite blanket. I sat between them and pulled them close. "First straddles on my tummy?" Lily looked up and asked. "Mom, is it true people are strongest when they stop running?" I pulled her close. "No, sweetheart. People are strongest when they realize they don't need anyone to be themselves." The atmosphere in the gallery that night was strangely beautiful, grand, yet quiet. People moved slowly between the paintings, whispering about colors, composition, or the meaning behind each brushstroke. I stood near a small corner, beside The Last Echo, the final piece in the series, depicting a woman walking in the rain holding a broken umbrella. Still, moving forward. I was speaking with an art critic when Monica approached, her expression slightly uneasy. Genesis, there's a new guest I think you should know. I followed her gaze, and there stood Edward near the entrance. No fancy suit, nothing to hide the exhaustion written all over his face. He stood silently, hands in his pockets, eyes locked on the center painting. No turning back. I took a deep breath, not because I was nervous, but because I knew this moment mattered. Not for closure between us, but to close a chapter that had gone on too long. I walked closer, stopping a few steps away. Edward turned as if sensing me, his eyes filled with remorse but no pleading, just quiet acceptance. I didn't come here to ask for another chance, he said softly. I came to witness you, finally, being fully yourself. I nodded, needing no thanks. And I'm grateful you had the courage to see it. A silence settled, just enough. Then I continued, voice gentle like wind. Edward, there's something you need to understand. I didn't succeed to get revenge. I didn't live well to make anyone regret. I live this way because I deserve to. He didn't respond, but in his eyes I saw release, not just for me, but for him too. Edward understood, and for the first time he let go. I turned and walked away without looking back. That night, I didn't just walk away from a conversation. I walked away from the old image of myself. The woman who had once been betrayed, broken, and discarded. 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a women's arts forum focused on rebuilding after hardship. I stood on stage in front of hundreds of eyes waiting for something, a story, a spark, a truth, to pull them back from despair. I didn't start with theory or quotes. I started with this. I was once the woman who returned her daughter's music box to her ex-husband because he claimed anything worth over $50 belongs to me. But today, I'm standing here in a room full of artists, entrepreneurs, survivors, not because I was lucky, but because I chose not to stop. The room fell silent. I told them about the day Noah asked if he should still love his father, about the time Lily called me the bravest person in the world, about the night I collapsed on the floor, unable to breathe, and the morning I painted my first piece. Hands trembling, heart hollow but still painting. Someone once told me I'd be nothing without him, and they were partly right. Because without him, I finally became me. A mother, an artist, a free soul. The applause wasn't thunderous, it was steady, like the journey I'd taken. That night, I came home to find Noah helping Lily build a robot model. They giggled together on the living room floor. I stood in the doorway, watching without interrupting. This was my family. Not perfect, but real. I stepped in, sat beside them and wrapped my arms around them both. Lily looked up, sleepy-eyed. Mom, do you think I can be like you when I grow up? I smiled and kissed her forehead. No, baby. You'll be even better than me. Because I've already cleared the path for you. And I knew, somewhere out there, there were more women like me, betrayed, rejected, pushed to their lowest, and rising. Each one an unfinished painting, but when they choose to keep going, to love themselves first, that's the most beautiful art they could ever create. My story isn't a tragedy, it's a rebirth. From a betrayed wife, a single mother, I've learned to rise, to heal, and to live in alignment with my worth. Now I no longer live to please others, I live to inspire my children. And women still caught in the storm of pain. True freedom doesn't come from leaving someone, it comes from bravely choosing yourself. And I did. What do you think about Genesis' journey? Should she forgive Edward if he truly changes? Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful and heartfelt stories about family.